Hi, I'm Katrina from Katrina K Creations, and today I'm going to show you how to sew a dart. The first thing I want to do before I sew my dart is to mark my dart on my fabric. So before I take all the pins out, I'm just going to take the pin out that's in my way of the dart, of marking the dart. And with my tracing paper, I'm going to mark my dart on my muslin. And this is just unbleached cotton muslin fabric that I'm using to test this pattern that I've drafted before I actually sew it out of my good fabric. I prefer to use the tracing wheel with the serrated edge, but you can also use a tracing wheel with the smooth edge. I also always put a line in the center of my dart because I find that this helps me when I'm actually pinning the dart before sewing. And you'll see how I actually use this line as a guide later in the video. So now I'm going to mark the dart. And before I remove the tracing paper, I just like to make sure that I can see the lines that I just marked. And this is pretty good. So now that my dart is marked, I'm ready to remove the rest of the pins from my piece. So thinking about how this is going to go in the machine and how I'm going to sew it and always start from the top and go to the point, I want to make sure I pin it that way as well. And I also put a couple of notches right on the line of the darts. You don't have to do this, but I find that this also helps during pinning. Now this is where my center line comes in handy. And I just fold the dart right on the center line. I'm not trying to crease it or anything, but I'm just using it as a guide. Also matching it up here where I've just put a couple of little snips. And starting from the top, I always pin it like this first. Now, of course, I can't run this through the machine with my pins facing that way, but because I'm left-handed, it's just easier for me to do it this way. If you're right-handed and you can pin them the other way, that'll work out better for you. And you can skip the next step that I'm going to do if you can do that. But anyway, I pin it this way, and the reason I'm doing this is because I want to see where this pin is and if it's matching up on the underside. And as you can see, the pin is a little bit off of the line. So what I'm trying to do is get it so the pin is on the line on both sides. So I'll just move it a little bit and then try it again. And as you can see, that I can live with that. Okay, that's close enough to the line for me. Or I can always try to get it a little closer so it's exactly on the line, and that's perfect. This step is optional. This is just a little step I do because I don't like it when it's off on the underside. I like that when I stitch it, I want the stitching to be as close to that line or on that line as possible. And I do that all the way up the dart until I get to the point and readjust when necessary. I put a pin right at the point, and I also want to put another one just down a little bit further. And I'm also going to match up my line as much as possible closer to this point. Okay, and that's not bad. Now if my pins were going the other way, that would be it. But because I'm left-handed, it's just kind of awkward for me to pin it that way. So what I do now to make sure everything stays in place is I pin across. And then I take these pins out because now these pins are going to allow me to run my dart through the machine while keeping everything in place. And as you're watching this video, just remember, as far as sewing techniques go, there's always more than one way to do it. This is not the only way to sew a dart. This is just the way I like to sew a dart. And if you have a different way that works for you, by all means, do it your way. So I would repeat these steps on every dart, on every piece that I have, and then you're ready to go and sew. Now I'm ready to sew my dart, and I sew everything with my machine stitch length set to 2.5, which is about 12 stitches per inch. And once I take the pins out, I want to make sure I hold my finger here to make sure nothing moves or shifts. So I just took the pin out that I had right at the point of my dart. So right before I get to the very end of my dart, I'm going to change my stitch length to 1.0 because I don't want to do a back stitch at the point of my dart because I want to make sure I avoid having any puckers at the point. Now I can remove this pin and I'm just going to sew right off the edge. And I want to have a little thread tail right here. So instead of doing a back stitch, I do a very small stitch so that the stitch won't come loose. And notice my needle is in the down position. So I'm going to hit this button to raise the needle up. I'm going to lift my presser foot, pull the dart slightly down, and I don't want to pull it so tight that this thread chain is pulling the dart. I want to just pull it so it has just a little bit of give. And I can make it longer if I need to. I'm going to lower my presser foot and put my needle down in the fabric. And I'm going to change my stitch length back to 2.5. And now I'm going to sew a couple of stitches and back stitch. And so here you can see this thread chain, and you can see that my dart, it's not pulling my dart in any way. And then I won't get a pucker at the point. It should be nice and smooth. So I'm going to clip off this end. And I haven't pressed this yet, but as you can see, my point is nice and smooth. There's no puckers, which is why I sew my darts this way. This is the side that I sewed. So on the underside, my stitch is pretty much on the line that I marked. And that's exactly what I wanted. Sometimes I can be somewhat of a perfectionist when I'm sewing, because it just bothers me or it just irks me when things aren't precise, but you don't have to be that way. And now I'm ready to press my dart. So this edge is my center back seam. Whenever I press my dart, I'm going to press the inside of my dart towards the center back, or if this was a front piece, the inside of my dart would be pressed toward the center front. So now I'm going to go press this dart, but this is how you sew a dart. In this video, I showed you how I mark my dart, how I pin my dart, and how I sew my dart. If you want to see more sewing tutorials, don't forget to subscribe. You can also find me over at KatrinaKCreations.com, and thank you for watching.